Okay, well, President Palacio is going to be a very hard act to follow, so I ask you to please bear with me. But it's actually a very, it's been a very, very interesting and inspiring presentation, and links up very well with what I was going to share with you, basically because President Palacio has brought to us and to this forum a different dimension of nation branding. A dimension that I will also like to continue developing with you. But first, let me thank again the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy and Mark Donfried very particularly for having invited us to this very timely, I think, and very interesting forum and the discussion on Latin America and the global economy, nation branding, tourism, and international investment. We are very, very honored. I am very honored to be here. And I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to share some thoughts with you. Let me first of all share with you what the Club of Madrid is, its mission, its vision, the way we work, in short, what the Club of Madrid and its members are and what they aim to do. Perhaps it's easier to start by telling you what we are not. We are not a football club. No, sorry, we're not the Real de Madrid. That's not it. Although we do share a very, very fascinating city, and as the Minister of Tourism from Ghana said earlier, football is a very important thing. But no, we're not that. We're not into debt restructuring or debt relief or debt cancellation. We are not the Paris Club. Again, another city. Although, unfortunately, some of our members have had to go. Some of our members come from countries that have had to go through the Paris Club experience. And we're not the Club of Rome either. Although we do share some members, and both institutions do focus and discuss and consider issues that are of interest to a globalized world and to an interdependent world. That is what we are not. So then what are we? The Club of Madrid is the world's largest assembly of democratic former heads of state and government, therefore former presidents and prime ministers, who act collectively and globally to bring their very unique democratic political insight, experience, and commitment to support current leaders as they address the challenges of today and of tomorrow, and to support them from a democratic perspective. We do this, they do this, because it is the members who are the protagonists. We do this by drawing on the credibility, the expertise, the access, and the convening power of 80 members. 80 members that come from 58 different countries. They're all men and women of different political colors, different political affiliations, but they have all been democratic heads of state or government. And they share a commitment to democratic values, democratic leadership, and as the motto of the organization says, democracy that delivers. So it's not really just about electoral democracy, it's about democracy that delivers. The Club of Madrid members represent only themselves and their experience and their insights. They do not represent their countries. This means, and also because they are former heads of state and government, they are much freer to speak on the basis of their personal experience, on the basis, as the gentleman was asking before, of what they did right and what they didn't do so right, and on the basis of the reflection on those on that political experience that they have been able to gather. And this experience, as you can well imagine, spans over a number of years and often over a number of different positions. They ended up being presidents or prime ministers, but many have been parliamentarians, ministers. Many have been in academia or the educational field. Many have been mayors at local government level. So their experience is varied. Many have been in business. Many have been journalists. It's as varied as the countries themselves are and as human beings themselves are. But they are all aware of and mindful of the pressures that our current political leaders face, the challenges that are being faced, and that is what they and the Club of Madrid tries to address and to support. Through the various projects that the Club of Madrid has, the members work side by side with current leaders, and that can be governmental leaders, non-governmental leaders, and policymakers, but always in that very direct exchange between the members often supported by experts on different areas that a project addresses. But there's always that presence of a member in all of our activities and in all of our projects. And the objective, as I was saying earlier, is to foster dialogue that can generate social and political change. The Club of Madrid assists then in the identification of politically sustainable solutions to the challenges being faced by today's leaders, developing recommendations, action plans, and implementation strategies. Beyond the educational value or the intrinsic value that the research that goes into each of our projects may have, because obviously we don't go into an issue. For example, if we're addressing climate change, as we have, or if we're addressing democracy, terrorism, and security, and the links between those three, or if we're addressing the problems of a specific country, there is a lot of work that goes into preparing the projects or the activities of the Club of Madrid, and into supporting the members, because obviously members are not experts on everything. They may have been presidents or prime ministers, but they do not necessarily all master everything. So we always work, and there's always that combination of scholars and policymakers and experts together with the political gravitas that the members bring. But in any case, above and beyond the value, the educational or the research value of that work, the approach tries to be as practical and as results-oriented as possible. And this, again, in the direct exchanges between members of the Club of Madrid and current leaders. These are peer-to-peer, often peer-to-peer exchanges, peer-to-peer counsel, that can be very discreet or can be very open, depending on what the need and the issue at hand is. And there's, of course, the ability that most, if not all, of our members have to deliver the right message at the right time to the right person, because they have the experience, they have the access, they have the convening power, and they have the gravitas. So putting all of that together, they are, we feel, able to bring the right message to the right person at the right time, or at least that's what we try to do. The Club of Madrid can have an impact in many different settings, and in the last 9 years, it's an organization that was formally established in 2002. In the last 9 years, we've engaged with numerous partners on democratization of the international financial institutions, on democratic responses to terrorism, on mobilizing political will in addressing climate change and energy challenges, on the promotion of inclusive societies. Our members have taken an active role in all of these exchanges, but also, at the national, regional, and international level, dealing and in discussions with policymakers at the international organization level, but also engaging in projects at the country level. We had a very interesting and actually premonitory in many ways project in 6 countries of the Middle East and North Africa: Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, Jordan, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia, on the topic of freedom of association in the Middle East and North Africa. Freedom of association obviously being one of the elements of that democracy that delivers. Freedom of association being an essential element to democracy, point stop. In many of them, and obviously many of them are in the news today, it is precisely that lack of freedom of association that is one of the elements that has risen to the forefront over these past weeks and months. Other projects have addressed women's participation in peace-building processes in the Horn of Africa and in Colombia, and political dialogue and leadership dialogue in Bolivia and Ecuador. In fact, I'm sorry, President Palacio isn't here, but one of our projects, country-level projects, was precisely in Ecuador at a moment where there were a number of reforms that were being undertaken. President Palacio was in office, and one of our members, Felipe González, together with some of the other experts, engaged in a number of meetings and discussions in Ecuador with policymakers and with President Palacio himself. Other projects have been conducted and undertaken in Timor-Leste, in Haiti currently. We have a project on reconstruction, institutional reconstruction. We all know that the dire need for physical and infrastructure reconstruction that Haiti experiences after the earthquake. but the reconstruction or maybe even the construction of strong institutions is also very, very important for Haiti, and very important if that physical reconstruction is going to be fruitful and successful. We are just undertaking another project also on democratic transition and reform in Kyrgyzstan. All of these projects have contributed to fostering consensus among key political and social stakeholders, mitigating conflict, and forging peaceful solutions in support of democratic transition and consolidation. And we feel that this allows us to fill a very unique niche, often as trusted advisors of current leaders and policymakers, who can use the strategic and discreet counsel of the members. But my presence here today is not about branding the Club of Madrid, but about the very concept of nation brand or nation branding, and what the Club of Madrid thinks or does about this concept. Nation branding, which is a concept that's been with us since the 90s, deals with question of national image, identity, the reputation of a country in the modern world, with investment, with trade, with tourism. We've heard about that this morning from the three persons that presented different cases and spoke about their particular countries, Namibia, Ghana, and Mexico. And in short, nation branding then therefore is about the image that a country has of itself and the image that it wants to put forth of itself to others. It's multivariable and cross-cutting process which can be subdivided into various areas, but it's also one that affects various areas. It's a process that engages governmental and non-governmental organizations, the public and the private sector, for the only way to change, update, enhance, and otherwise influence a country's image is through the things that a country does, and not only by the things a country says. The Club of Madrid works precisely on what countries do, or what countries are trying to do, in this aspect that we think is very important as part of a national brand or a nation brand, and that's very important in influencing or in determining a country's image in today's world. And this is a matter of policy. Nation branding, a decision to move forward on any of these issues is a matter of policy. It's a matter of strategy and innovation, and it's a matter of investment over a long period of time. It's not really a matter of slogans or of logos or of PR. It's a lot deeper. And policy is key in all of this. At least this is what we feel. And above and beyond the different areas that we may discuss where we find areas that need nation branding, benefit from nation branding, and contribute to nation branding, there is always policy involved and decision-making involved. And this policy can have positive or negative implications in terms of the image and the projection of a country. And in many or in all cases, this policy is very much related, or should be very much related, to governance. The governance that a country gives itself, the governance that cities and leaders give their country. And it is the Club of Madrid views that these implications are more likely to be positive, or the impact is more likely to be positive if we're talking about democratic governance, and if a nation enjoys democratic governance. The view that others will have of a nation that has an effective and efficient democratic governance is probably going to be a lot more positive than when that is lacking. Political maturity and political stability, as well as respect for key democratic values and principles, such as the rule of law, free and fair elections, the separation of powers, peace, as Prime Minister Angula of Namibia mentioned this morning, respect for human rights, freedom of speech and association. All of these increasingly make up and conform a favorable notion or a favorable image that one has of a nation, of a given nation, or of a given country, and that a country wants to project. These aren't just favorable, though, to political stability. They're also catalysts for socioeconomic stability, for growth, for prosperity, and for human development in general. Turning a little bit to Latin America, since I think that this afternoon's session is going to be focusing and concentrating on Latin America. It's interesting to note that over the past 2 years, many Latin American countries have been celebrating their 200th anniversary, their 200th anniversary of their independence. Countries like Mexico, Argentina, Colombia, Chile, Bolivia, Ecuador, Paraguay, and Venezuela, many of them have been in these kinds of celebrations over the past years. Those were the years that were the turning points in terms of the end of colonization, or in the majority of these countries, and the emergence and construction of the nation states that Alfredo Palacio was speaking about earlier. Now, time has passed and the world has changed, yet it's curious to find and to see that Latin America remains and is still seen as culturally very rich, as very colorful, very exotic, very happy, with some idealistic revolutionaries here and there, some dictators here and there, violence, drug trafficking, organized crime. There's a lot of things that come to one's mind when one thinks of Latin America: economic crises, debts. But this isn't all that Latin America has been doing for the past 200 years, and it certainly isn't what we see in Latin America today. In the midst of this very strong economic and systemic crisis that we've been living in Europe over the past 2.5, 3 years, and in most of the industrialized world, Latin America has really fared quite well. Its economy has grown at rates over 5%, in some cases 8, 9%, very impressive growth rates over a number of years. There's been also political stability. What we called the lost decade in the 80s may very well become, this decade of 2010s may become the decade of Latin America, because it is doing rather well if it keeps it up. And if it keeps it up, I think it's very much linked, perhaps not consciously, to nation branding, but it is part of the nation branding that we see and we perceive from Latin America and of Latin America today. A lot of this President Palacio has referred to earlier, and I'm sure the Ambassador of Honduras will be referring to right after my presentation. But if we look at the current economic crisis, we see that for many Latin American countries, it hasn't been that much of a crisis, a bit like Asia. And what's important now is to make sure that this will be sustainable in the long run. So all of these different factors that we are concerned about when we think of nation branding, and that we think of when we think of nation branding, have to come into play, have to be managed, and have to have the policy environment that allows the Latin American countries to manage them successfully. And personally, I do think that there is reason to be optimistic in the case of Latin America. A lot of the recent performance is the product of a paradigm, or of a change in paradigm, a change in the model, and as I was saying, of the effective application of policies. With very few exceptions, most of the Latin American countries have embraced the pillars of democracy, macroeconomic stability, and effective redistribution. Macroeconomic, and I'm talking about the pillars. I'm not saying that they've been successful in all of this. I'm saying that they have embraced the pillars. They are working to respect these 3 pillars. Macroeconomic stability has become a policy imperative in most countries. Politicians understand that keeping inflation low, public debt down, observing fiscal rectitude, and free trade are all good not just for the economy, but also for their citizens, and therefore for their electoral interests. But the change has also been political, and leaders, statesmen, politicians have accepted the rules of the game and have reached internally a consensus that allows the maintenance and the respect of these different pillars and different values. These pillars also include a renewed agenda on social policies. As I mentioned, the 3rd pillar was redistribution and the reduction of inequality. Latin America, for many years, has been the most unequal, I don't know whether that's the word in English, but I think it is, unequal of continents. And that has been more than a brand, a stigma. Well, it still has to tackle that challenge, but it is tackling it. There are a number of social programs in very many countries that are making the situation better. It is not solved, but it is making the situation better. Inequality is decreasing. Fiscal sustainability is still work in progress, and public debt continues. As I said, the problems have not been solved, but there is a consciousness that they have to be solved, and that there is a relative consensus between government and its citizens that this has to be solved and has to be addressed. So that we can move away from a vicious circle of inequality and of poverty and of inflation and all of the other problems that I mentioned earlier, to a virtuous circle of growth and of equity that can and should be achieved. And all of this will definitely have an impact on the institutions, on the governance, and on the way the country is perceived, therefore on its national brand. And they are all a part of this new paradigm. Now, the big difference, as I see it, is this time around, is that not only have the leaders accepted all of these economic or macroeconomic elements and the need to apply these different policies, but this is being done within a framework of democracy, of much more democracy that the continent has ever experienced, and as broadly as it has experienced it. Politicians, therefore, realize that they need to tend to these issues, for example, to reduce poverty and to expand the middle class, to succeed and to gain the trust of citizens, and to be able to govern. If a policy framework is preserved, there are good arguments to expect that 2010, or this decade, will be a transformational decade for the region, not just in terms of per capita income growth, but also in terms of the reduction of poverty and inequality. And as I was saying, all of this is very much a part of the nation brand of the Latin American countries, conscious of the fact that Latin America is not monolithic, as Africa is not monolithic, neither is Europe. Each country has its own specificity, its own needs, its own challenges. But in general, if we look at the region and at the countries that make it up, it does have to, or they all have to fight a certain number of stereotypes that persist regarding the region. And Latin America has made enormous efforts to emerge from this generic, outdated, and unhelpful brand of the continent and prove their specific relevance in the world concert, politically, economically, socially. And obviously, all of these efforts go far beyond just attracting tourism or luring foreign investment or facilitating trade or improving private sector competitiveness. Profound political changes, profound changes in economic policy and management, and their consequent results have been crucial to the improvement of nation brand efforts. And cognizant of the value of their brand as an asset, as a premium, and not as a discount, Latin American countries are taking advantage of the situation and moving forward to improve their nation brand. Basically, therefore, what from the Club of Madrid, because of the nature of the work we do, what we see as an important element when we look at nation branding, when we look at this concept and work on it, is to remember the policy aspect of it, to remember the governance aspect of it, to remember that governance can be a positive element in nation branding. Stability, peace, governance, those are all elements that can certainly make for success in this process of nation branding. And as is the image of collaboration between major actors and sectors of society, and including government, investment promotion agencies, private sector, all of these elements that are active in the generation of this nation brand. So, I mean, with this, I just want to re-emphasize and repeat that for an organization like the Club of Madrid, for our members who are all politicians, who are all leaders and former heads of state and government, but who continue to be political leaders, obviously when think and they work on the promotion of democratic values and democratic leadership, they might not be thinking of nation branding, but they're certainly acting on it. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Ms. Agüero. We have time for a few questions if you'd like. Feel free if you have questions or comments about the presentation, about the Club of Madrid, don't hesitate. And as always, if you can then stand and introduce yourself beforehand. Who would like to ask the first question? You're all too shy. There we go. We have two, actually. Maybe we'll start on the front and then we'll go to the back.
Hello, my name is Marcus. I'm from Germany, but I'm based in Stockholm and part of a research project dealing with nation branding. You were emphasizing the link between democracy and nation branding, and there's also some academic literature on this aspect. But then, of course, one wonders, could it be maybe an advantage to have more like an authoritative regime, like maybe China or Russia, for nation branding in terms of branding? What are your thoughts on this? Thank you.
It depends on what your starting point is. I mean, if you ask me my thoughts, I would say that no, because authoritarianism is not what I would aspire to. But that being said, and there is much literature and there is much discussion nowadays as to, what degree or how much authoritarianism in the cocktail, or how much more freedom in the cocktail to have a cocktail that is productive, that is effective, that is efficient, and even among the members of the Club of Madrid and the discussions that they have internally as to how best to approach some of the issues, that is a topic, and there are of course advantages that one can see in authoritarianism, but you have to weigh them, and depending on your scale of values and what at one point in time is most needed, is that leaders, I suppose, act on it. I'm sure that there is an element of authoritarianism in any decision making. The important thing is that the decision-making process, be as democratic as possible. But in terms of the value of the democratic values that the organization and its members promote, I'd say that in that mix there is very little, in that cocktail there is very little authoritarianism.
Okay, I think there's a question in the back.
My name is Darnell Summers. I don't think we should gloss over some of the historical facts, some of the things that impact on what's happening or what has happened in South America, Central America. Colonialism, Yankee imperialism, United Fruit, support for governments like Fulgencio Batista, Somoza. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And many of the problems that people in that area face today are a direct result of the policies of Western European countries and the United States. Bloody history, up until the recent past. We see that now things are unfolding in the world. Every day when you turn on the television, there's an uprising. Even in Wisconsin, where the government's trying to take the right of collective bargaining away from people, the right to strike, things that people were fighting for that, in fact, maybe some of your ancestors who maybe came to America fought for in the 19th and 18th century, left Europe to come to the United States looking for a better life and found that they had to fight discrimination there. So when you talk about democracy, what are we talking about? What is it? How is it defined? Because some of the people who claim to be the bastions of democracy are actually nothing of the kind.
Nothing but?
Nothing of the kind.
Of the kind.
Nothing of the kind. So in this, I think we're in a new era here. And I'm always inspired by the young people, and these young people who are taking to the streets all over the world. As I said, from Madison to Tripoli. It's a remarkable phenomenon. But it's important to understand why these things happen, why they exist, so that we do not repeat the same mistakes once again. We must have a clear understanding of history. So I would object to presenting the United States. Although, don't get me wrong, there are people who have, ideas and they have goals and aspirations all over the planet. We don't have a monopoly. America does not have a monopoly on justice or injustice or what have you. We're all trying to find our way on this planet, and we need to do that together.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. And I don't recall that I mentioned the United States. But what I did talk about was democratic values, a definition of democracy. We can go back to history, to the Greeks, and talk about their definition of democracy. But I don't think that's what we're saying. What we're saying is that democracy today is something that is also work in progress, that is also something that we aspire to and we work at. But first of all, in order to work at it, we have to be citizens. And to be citizens implies a number of things. Among them, a number of rights that citizens have, and ¿cómo se dice? Derechos y compromisos y ahora no me sale. ¿Cómo? Obligations. Yes, obligations. Sorry. And in that sense, it is something. Democracy is obviously what we all make it to be. But we need to have a minimum framework within which to work. Elections do not make democracy, but elections are a part of it. Freedom of association, freedom of speech might not make democracy, but it is certainly a part of it. Economic rights are not going to make democracy, but all of those are elements that we have to put together. And again, thinking that we have rights as citizens, and working to make sure that those rights are respected, but also recognizing that we have obligations, and that part of that obligation is precisely to work towards a system that will deliver, to make sure that we elect leaders that will deliver what they have promised. That is why the Club of Madrid concentrates on that concept all the time, because it's not just democracy, it's not just electoral democracy, it's a lot more. And believe me, I hate to speak for 80 former presidents and prime ministers, and I'm not, but as somebody who has worked with them for 9 years, 8 years, I think many of them recognize that they have made mistakes, or they have not perhaps been as perceptive or as quick in noticing certain things. And what they do and what they try to do, what the organization tries to do, is to share those experiences, good and bad, and to try to work with those that are trying to make democracy work today, do it better.
Is there a final question? Yes, okay.
Yeah, thanks. Mine will be very small. But we need to make concrete analysis of what really make us to digress as a society and as a country, and as nations. My fellow colleague here spoke of imperialism and the unipolar system that you find yourselves in, informed by colonization of a special type. those are the root cause of problems in the world. But that does not condone that those who have been colonized by the colonizer should continue to do so. Most of the world agenda is set by the United States. He called it the Yankees. And therefore, if you do not conform to the policies set by either in London or in Washington, it's either that policy, you are with us or against us. That's the premise that we're moving from. And therefore, in as much as how hard you try to project the image of your own country, the liberal media and whatever the Yankees thinks that is correct or is not correct will not necessarily thrive in any part of the country. Precisely because if ever you don't open the markets for the benefit of the West, or in this particular, your United States of America and so on and so forth, it will not thrive precisely because there will not be much more investment. What is the catch for the developing country? We need to encourage, as part of our ultimate attainment of economic growth, is that we need to put a much more investment in education and skills development. Because that's what then begins to say, you may no longer export your engineers, you may no longer export your skilled personnel, you will have them. And therefore, that would necessarily mean that you have a right to bargain. You would have a right to say that I have all engineers, I have a resource material. Africa has a plenty of material. I was sitting and say, which material do we have in South Africa? Almost any other material you can think of, you can mine it and have it in South Africa. So as in Congo, you do have that. And therefore, but what you do not have would be skilled personnel, so as that when you begin to mine these things, you don't take it out and go and process it somewhere, and it comes back as a raw, as a finished product. But you engage in a process, in a beneficiation process in that particular country. And therefore, that cannot necessarily be able to happen as long as we do not necessarily encourage our countries and our fellow developing countries to invest much more, not in arms, but to invest much more in education. But the reality is that imperialism, either of a special type or in its own entirety, creates world problems.
I don't want to move this anymore. Now, thank you very much. I agree with you as well, and I think that education is perhaps the most important investment. And it is, again, and I hate to be repetitive, but that is a decision that the leaders and the policymakers have to make. When budgets are defined and decided upon, where the monies are going to go, what budget line, what sector. And education should definitely be one of the main sectors, if not the main one. And let me just differ a little bit. I would say that is the case in the third world, but it's also the case in the world as a whole. I think that education is a budget line that we all have to worry about. And as far as capacity building, let me just share a little bit from one of the projects that we are in the process of wrapping up. We take very seriously the whole issue of skills building and capacity building, and do think that is one of the contributions that the members can make. Not because we don't set up classes of leadership or any of that, but because in their dialogues and the exchanges that they have with individuals in the missions or in the projects, there is a lot of that skill building and capacity building. And this particular project is one that we have been developing on women's participation in peacekeeping in the Horn of Africa. Well, you probably all know about UN Security Council Resolution 1325, about the role of women in peacekeeping processes in post-conflict situations, conflict and post-conflict situations. Where there in that project and through the project, a group of 40 women leaders from 40 different women's organizations, grassroots organizations in 6 countries in the Horn of Africa have been brought together. We call them the G40. And the G40 has been exchanging with members of the Club of Madrid and other experts on issues such as and acquiring peace and security fluency, the language, the knowledge of the organizations, the institutions that engage in peacekeeping and conflict resolution, and in acquiring the skills to be able to participate and hopefully through and with the help of the members also opening doors so that they can find a place in their own countries in the negotiating table. We cannot guarantee that. There is no way that a project of the Club of Madrid can say, okay, this means that the G40 is going to be sitting, each of them is going to be sitting at their negotiating tables. We can't guarantee it, but we're making every effort to bring something that we feel contributes to making that a little bit more possible.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, María Elena Agüero.